So continuing on the theme of how our moms, what they were up against as far as opportunities and their conditioning and the times of things, and how they influenced our own sense of what our opportunities were, our growth. I don't know, mine was a little, I think all of us have our own unique mom stories. Um, but my dad, in his journey in life, married a number of times, and by the time he met my mom, they were both pretty old. My mom was in her late 30s, my dad was in his mid 40s. And so, and my mom died a few days after my brother and I were born. That was in 1955. So here was this man, 47 years old, with two newborns, one who were in an orphanage for a time being, and a 3-year-old. Now back then, they didn't have single dads. You know, they just didn't even think that dads could do those kind of things because dads were the breadwinners. So they had us in orphanage and then in foster care. I was quite sick when I was born, so I was in intensive care for a few days. And then he had this dilemma of, well, the state of New Jersey is going to take my 2 babies away from me. And before my mom died, we don't know exactly what was the cause, whether it was a stroke or an aneurysm. But she had somehow communicated to him that under any circumstances, he must keep the family together. So that was a promise he made her before she died. So the state of New Jersey, however, thought differently and was thinking about putting me and Brian in, adopting us out. And so my dad was commuting to New York. He worked in a restaurant up there, and one day on the commuter train, he met a woman who was 2 years older than him that had just left a marriage. And over the period of a course of a few weeks, he basically told her his story, that he needed to find a wife that for his children. And so my mom came into my life, and her name was Jenny. And so my dad was 47 and she was 49. So we were basically raised by grandparents. It was not just a generational thing, it was a 2-generational thing. And considering the circumstances, I think she really gave it her best shot. But being raised by folks who were that much different in age, the idea was for all 3 of us, my brother and I and my sister, to just marry. For the girls, we married the U.S. steel worker. U.S. Steel was in our neighborhood, so you married a U.S. steel worker, and you got married and you moved next door or in the backyard so that the fences sort of met each other, and you were a housewife. My stepmom never finished grade school, and so this was really the sign of being an accomplished woman in that generation. My dad had gotten a house from the GI Bill, so they had their own home, they had their own yard, in a new development in Pennsylvania, one of the first subdivisions in America. And so it was kind of laid out there that that's what you did. And unlike the rest of the community, whose moms and dads really supported them to make their lives better and to really go to school and encourage higher education, for some reason, my stepmom was quite threatened by the whole thing. And she had some really smart kids that she was raising, and she was quite threatened by higher education. So for my sister to be able to go to college, she was the first one to have a college degree in our family. She basically left home to be able to do that, because mom really didn't, getting married and having kids and having a house and being a housewife was good enough. So there wasn't any encouragement to better ourselves as far as going to college. And as for me, I gave it a shot going to a community college as a fine art major, and she just was very unsettled about that, so I ran away from home. So here she was doing her best, trying to have these, to show something for marrying and having somebody else's children to raise, and 2 of them were like gone. My brother was the only one that really followed in fact, he followed the girls' trend. He stayed home until he was in his 30s. And then he met and married and moved a few miles away and has a lovely family, quite successful. So he did everything I think that mom and dad wanted us to do. And so for whatever reason, I just really had a life where, even though I didn't go to college, I lived by my wits. I left home when I was 18 and made my way in the world all of my life either in the trades. I was a carpenter, I worked for brick masons, I worked for electricians, I worked for landscapers. So in that respect, I was usually the only woman on the construction crew. I was usually the only woman on the painting crew. And you go through a little bit of a hazing period in these situations in the trades back in the 70s. They give you the worst work, they give you the hardest work, they give you the lousy hours, and I just kind of, I'm kind of stubborn in that way. So I was able to make my way in the trades that when there were always these, the building would start and about halfway through they would lay off half the crew. Well, I was always still around, and then they'd lay off the crew again, and Nance was still around. So there was something about my tenacity that they saw was helpful in the construction trades. And so I learned a little bit on how to make my way in the world. So I think that I was just cut from a slightly different cloth. I sometimes think that if I'd gone to college, perhaps it wouldn't have been so hard to support myself. I had some pretty lean years when I was living alone in my 20s out in the middle of nowhere, trying to make ends meet. But, and I think, and I don't know at the end what my mom ever thought about my endeavors. She did come to visit me when I was in my late 20s. I built a little house in Coquilala, Idaho, and her and my dad traveled across the country. She made curtains for my little cabin. My dad helped me put the deck on. And one day she looked at me and she said, "You are so selfish. All you thought about your entire life was what you wanted to do. You never thought about me. You never thought about your father and what would really make us happy. All you did is what you ever darn well pleased, and you were really, really selfish." And so I kind of owned that for a really, really long time until I was able to let go and to realize that I was little black sheep out there, doing everything that she never thought that a girl could do and never thought that a daughter would do. And I think in the end, before she died, we kind of made peace a little bit. We talked on the phone a few days before she died. And so it took a long time for me to make peace with the fact that I was just a daughter of a different color, and that I didn't make any mistakes, that I did what I felt I needed to do to live my life. And because of her sacrifice, because of what she gave up to raise us and the struggles that she had internally, the Dharma has really helped me to appreciate her kindness. She gave and gave. She cooked, she cleaned, she kept the house, she managed the money. She sent us to school. She made our lunches for 12 years. We never bought school lunches. She made our clothes. And so she gave, and so as the years went on, I got to see that despite this part of our relationship, that she took care of us. She showed her love in the way that she understood how to love us. And so as a result, I learned how to cook and sew and take care of myself and survive and be able to do my laundry and go shopping and balance a budget. So for that, I really am grateful, because that served me well as the years had gone on. So moms can be great teachers, and sometimes we have to do what moms don't want us to do to be able to really live our lives and fulfill them in a deep way. If I hadn't left home, I would have never met the Dharma. So in that respect, running away, which is what I did, because I knew that if I hadn't, I would be married to a steel worker and have 3 children and live on the block over, and it was fine for many, many women, but for me it wasn't. So running away, I learned about myself. And I have Mom to thank for that.